Hello, everyone. My name's Hank Setala,
And I'm Casey MacBride.
and we're here with another fun episode of Stir Crazy Shamans. Hello, everyone. Again, my name's Hank Setala, and we're really excited about today's topic, psychic abilities, because it's on the top of everybody's mind, especially when you're just at home, just you, yourself, and your soul. It is
And your spirit guides.
And your spirit guides. Yeah, you're not totally home alone. You're never really alone. In fact, we have a whole episode called "You're Not Alone." But it's a great time to really get in touch with that inner knowing and that psychic awareness. And with us today, we'll be having Mary Ford on in here in just a moment. She is actually one of the people who does psychic readings and is stepping into her gifts, so she's going to have a lot of amazing contributions. Casey, what would you want to start with talking about today about psychic awareness and abilities?
So for me, the journey that has led me up to being able to communicate with spiritual beings, and just communicating with source, channeling messages, doing all the work that I do, every little bit of it. And sometimes it was frustrating. I remember there were times when all I wanted so badly was to be able to see spirit. I could feel things, but I couldn't see, and there were periods of intense frustration, which I then learned, I realized were just my own mental blocks. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. All of the work, even all the suffering I had to go through in order to get over certain things, wouldn't trade it for anything, because my daily experience is just so magical thanks to the opening up of my psychic abilities. Like just last night, I was asking the question, how does it get any better than this? Which I've been learning is a beautiful question to ask. Whether something good or bad happens, you can ask that question, and the universe will often right away show you how it does get much better than that.
And I don't know if you do or not, but Barry is one of our practitioners for access, so we'll have another access component to that. Actually, I'll just add her in now. Why not?
Yeah.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Hey.
Yeah, and I've always been intuitive. When I was born, I had a near-death experience, and I always just knew things. Like I just knew. I didn't have a conversation with guides necessarily, but then I did start to see stuff. And there was one experience that really kind of scared me. I actually broke up with a girl over it. If she's ever going to watch this video, she'll be like, "So that's what really happened, right?" Because I'm in her basement and I see this thing, and I'm just like, "Holy shit!" And it's like, "I'm not here for you," and I'm just like, bye. And I go running out. I'm like, it's not going to work out. See ya. And we, and I never look back. And then I actually told Spirit, I'm like, you know what? I can't handle a mouse running across the floor without freaking out. So like, don't show me Spirit until I'm like really ready for it. And then just recently, about a year ago, I always would just know Spirit was there and just have knowings and memories. And I was outside talking to Brian before he left. So actually, I guess this has been 2 years ago at least. He's been gone longer than I thought. And I'm standing outside of the center, and my foot's kind of arched up a little bit, just standing at an angle. And I just had this awareness to look underneath my foot, and right underneath my foot was this little mouse. And I didn't freak out at all. And the mouse just kind of looked at me and then scurried off. And then I was like, oh, cool. And then I thought of that moment where I told Spirit, I get scared at a mouse. Don't show me stuff until I won't be afraid of it. And then I saw like a full apparition of like a spirit person wrapped all in white and like kind of glowing with kind of like an Arabian Night mask across its face, and just looked at me, and then it stepped aside and was like gone. And I'm like, wow, I guess all this stuff is going to start coming back, because now I have the awareness where I'm aware that it's there. I'm not going to be afraid of it.
Now, so it was the experience you told about in the girlfriend's basement. Was that the first time you actually saw a spiritual being?
Like as I see a physical being, yes.
Okay.
I was always aware of things, but never like saw something like that. And it was a very interesting entity, which has actually become to be a very potent guide for me.
Oh, that's awesome. So this is I think something cool to share for all three of us. So the first time I remember ever actually seeing, like as if I was seeing with my eyes, a spiritual being, is I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were driving to like a doctor's appointment in downtown Cleveland, and I was just having kind of a casual conversation. And this was the time when I was like just starting to have these abilities wake up and come online for me, but I'd never actually seen a spiritual being like right there in front of me, and I saw, I was just kind of looking around, looked over to the side, and I saw this spiritual being. It was like an old man walking across the street. And I knew it wasn't a physical old man, because they were like this purpley energy type color, but it was so vivid and clear, and the way it was moving was like perfect. And I just saw this guy. There was a puddle he walked across, stepped in the puddle, which was still before that, stepped in the puddle, and I got freaked out. And I was like, whoa, what was that? And the girlfriend with me, I was like, what? I'm like, I saw a spirit over there. And then I looked back, and so this happened in like a fraction of a second. Like, looked away, looked back, the being was gone, but where their foot had stepped, the puddle was still rippling from the footstep in the puddle. So that was the first time. And it's funny, it's so fun for me to tell those stories now, because like nowadays I see spirit everywhere all the time, and it's just like an everyday occurrence. But back then, when you first have an experience, it's like this mind-blowing thing. So Mary, what was your first experience with spirit in that kind of story?
I started as a kid, and I would see like all the stuff in my room. And I tell my mom about it, and my sister and I would play with these spirits, and my mom would always be like, oh my God, Casper. She thought like we were blaming things that would break and stuff in the house on an imaginary ghost friend, that we actually broke stuff. So over time, I kind of had like a similar experience to Hank, where it started just being so many things at once when I was a kid that I just blocked it all out. And I did such a good job of blocking it all out that I didn't realize that I actually had these things that I was like so wanting. You know, you read all these books and you see the TV shows and you're like, man, it would be so cool if I could connect that way with the world. And I actually had it. I just chopped it off. And going back, so I just started reopening things in January this year.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I found like an old book that I had like written this story in middle school, 9th grade area. And it was all channeled. Like, I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, this is channeled. This is not like, this is so cool. It's like got ancient alien theory in it. And like some of my past lives that have been shown to me. I'm like,
oh, wow.
So cool.
That's awesome. Oh, I'm super happy that you're reconnecting with that, because I know a lot of people who did have those kinds of experiences, but they never end up opening back up to them. They just stay shut down. So that's awesome that you're reconnecting. And to anyone who's out there listening, if you have any memories of that, of like imaginary friends or things that you kind of pushed away and were told were just imagination and weren't worth your time, maybe now's the time to reflect and think, hey, is that something that could contribute to my life that I want to reevaluate and rediscover?
Right. And thinking about it now, that was a scary one where I started kind of to shut down my gifts, and I shortly thereafter started kind of medicating. Prior to that, as a kid, like there was plenty of other times where it wasn't scary, but that's not the first place I went when we started talking about this. But I remember there was a lot of other things growing up. Like the childhood imaginary friends kind of reminded me. Except me and my one friend Scott, it wasn't just that we would have imaginary friends. We would actually, our beings would change spots, and I would be where he was, and he would be where I was. And my mom always thought I was just pretending to be my friend Scott, but we were actually kind of like switching places for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
So cool.
So we were doing stuff like that. And it's like, oh, but as a parent, you're like, well, that's just in your head. Or that's cute. Look how they're pretending to be their friend. No, we switched places because it was like we were getting bored, and we want to.
And no one told you couldn't. No one told you that was impossible.
No one told us that we couldn't. And it was like when a very dear friend that had then moved from Cleveland to Chicago, and we still were close, even though we didn't get to talk much. So kind of cool.
Yeah, and thinking back again, that was not my first experience actually seeing spirit. That was my first, like, since I begun on this path. But I remember one instance in particular, and back then I thought what me and my friends saw was physical, but we were on Pelee Island. It's the southernmost point in Canada in Lake Erie. It's one of the Lake Erie Islands, but in Canadian waters. And my family's had a cottage up there since my parents were younger. And it's been a magical place for me and my family and friends, ever since I was a baby. Basically, we've been going up there during the summers. And one of my best friends in childhood and I were up there sitting around a fire. And I think at this particular moment, like, my parents were inside. We were still really young, but for some reason we were by ourselves out at the fire. And I remember we were watching, and this beauty. Now, the way I thought it was some kind of wild, exotic, like bioluminescent insect, but it was this giant thing. I mean, about like 3 times the length of my arm, and had this like head on it, and these like 3 beautiful tails, and it was like all these different colors, but it just came up for like this flash, and then it was gone. Me and my friend looked at each other and were like, what the hell was that bug? What was that insect that just flew by? We had no, but thinking back on it now, I know that was some kind of spiritual being, and I've actually seen those beings since then. Now that I'm able to open up my site, and so I have a little more of an explanation of what they are.
What are they? Because my sister and my family would go up to Canada, Niagara Falls, and camp there all the time. And I'd be like, I am the Earth Goddess, and pretend like I was so connected. But we'd see those too. We called them angel moths. We had no idea what they were.
Great word for them. That's a great word. So it was actually my angels that explained to me sort of what they are. Now I didn't get like a really in-depth, like scientific, like this is the spiritual species name or anything. But the way they described it to me is these beings are, they are attracted to joyful energy, and so whatever they are specifically, I'm not sure, but they hang out around like joyful energy, and they just kind of like love to bask in that sort of energy. So that's why we sometimes see them around us. But they're like more prevalent in search. They seem to hang out around the lake. I don't know why that is. But yeah.
Very cool. We have Nanette sharing something with us too, that she knows that she had an imaginary friend that she had for a few years, but her baby brother, that it was her baby brother who passed away, and she would take her other brother to teleport to friendly ghost land through our closet. So kind of like the journey to Narnia, going portal. And that's fun. And then Yvette was just saying that that's awesome. So thanks for the feedback. We love your contribution to the conversation. Very cool. I have never seen a spiritual moth, but it doesn't surprise me. There's all kinds of like things that I just perceive as energy outlays, where I can look, and that's how I first started seeing spirit a lot. Would be I would just see like the outline of like an energy field, like you might see a bubble of an aura, and I would know something was there. But then I would have to just kind of center in, and then I would just have the awareness of what it was without necessarily fully seeing it. But I would see that very often as a child, and that's something you can very easily practice to wrap this into how to develop psychic abilities. Just sitting with a very soft gaze with a little bit of dim light in your room or whatnot, you may start to see the outlines of different spirit beings and different things to start just honing in on your own awareness.
And sometimes people will see almost like the air is alive with these little particles that move through it.
Called the sparkles.
The sparkles. Yeah. And
I always hold my breath when that happened because I didn't know what it was. I'd be like, oh no.
I remember when I first started to notice that, was looking up at the sky. Like I see like it's almost like there are all these microscopic organisms just all over the place, but it's when I have kind of a soft gaze looking up at the open like blue sky. But that was that was before I started to really develop my ability to see spirit, and back then I was just kind of like, are these bacteria inside of my eyeballs, or what's going on right now? So, yeah. So I can see how, and that's where, a lot of people never end up developing psychic abilities that have a lot of potential for this kind of thing, because they have an experience like that. And again, they've never been taught or have no sort of explanation in their mind for it. They've never been taught about it. So they just kind of shut down and go, I was just making that up, or that was weird. And then they move on instead of asking, well, what can this, you're better with the questions than I am, but how can I expand upon this? How can this be a contribution? How can I learn more about this and make this into something that I can use to contribute to myself and others?
What energy could I be, and what choices could I make to take this ability and create the greatest possibility for myself and the world with total ease? Would be a good question to ask.
But now, so we all started out having these experiences, and some freaked out or whatever. But I think we've all come sort of a long way and are now consciously using our abilities, and we can do that like Mary and I are doing, and Hank. We channel messages from spirit for ourselves and others. But one thing I wanted to touch on was just how beautiful your experience can be, just to enjoy using your psychic abilities without needing to accomplish anything. Like, for example, last night, I was asking that question, how does it get any better than this? This is what I kind of started to talk about when we first started this. And my angel guides were around me. And they're like, how does it get any better than this? Okay, well, have you ever cuddled with an angel before? And I'm like, I don't know if we've done that. So they came into bed with me, and I was cuddling with 4 angels. And and then I asked, how does it get any better than this? And then the one angel that works with fire started to use fire to put on this like lights show above us. And I'm just sitting there in bed, before I would normally just be thinking about nonsense or whatever about the day. And I'm sitting there cuddling with these angels and watching this like fire light show in the sky above my room. And
another question just came through to ask, like, what could I be to see the magic that's around me right now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to lose it if I did say it right there.
No, yeah, that's a great question.
What would it take to see the magic?
But yeah, I mean, there's tons of magic happening around us all the time, and if we take the time to learn to start to tune into that, I mean, people talk about like, I hear people say the word mundane reality in terms of like the physical reality versus spiritual worlds, and I think the reason why people sometimes use that term mundane, which I don't necessarily like because I don't think it is, but they use that because the spiritual realm, if you're just starting to open up to it and you're learning to perceive, feel it, see it, whatever way it comes through, it really is like blindingly beautiful. Even to this day, it's still incredibly beautiful. And every time I open up my sight, I'm filled with like such an overwhelming sensation of joy.
I think one of the resistances people might have to developing their gifts, not think I'm getting this clearly to say for somebody, that when you see people doing reading work and healing work, there's like, well, I don't want the responsibility, the accountability of needing to do that. And you don't have to develop that gift and that ability to perceive spirit for anybody other than you. So that's really, do it for yourself, and you can choose later, how you want to share that gift with the world or not share the gift with the world. Hi, Terry. I will message you afterwards. I think you're with Fellowships. I'm happy to share that with you regarding the platform, and I'll send you a link for it. And then we have Faith coming in saying she catches a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye every now and then, but more commonly I feel pressure on the back or arm, as if somebody has placed their hand on me. Definitely interested in developing it further. And whenever you feel pressure, like if you feel like something going on your face or in your body, you could also ask the question, what am I aware of that my body's acknowledging for me? Because oftentimes us, the being, has an awareness, and part of us says, I don't want to know that. And just because we don't want to know that doesn't mean the body's not going to acknowledge that. And that is where impacts empaths a lot, because they're aware of so much. And instead of being in the space of being the hollow bone and letting that flow through them, now they're kind of engaging with the energy a little bit more, and it can experience it. You can experience it as different things like that. Before I bring up the next comment, any other things I'll bring that up again if either of you want to chime in on this comment for Faith.
Like a reading?
No, not a reading, but if you have any inspiration, there's no rules, then I guess you could do a reading.
I just wanted to say, and again, validating it, and if so you're getting those sensations of the pressure, or like you see something out of the corner of your eye. When you see that in your mind, validate that as okay, that was spirit I was feeling, seeing, and thank you so much for that. Giving that gratitude. And placing the attention on it, or writing it down, taking some kind of physical action, actually writing about the experience, and then even telling others who are open and you're comfortable with sharing. You're doing a lot of things to send signals to your subconscious and to spirit that information is important. And the more you do that, the more of that information you'll receive. And what starts out as a little glimpse out of the corner of your eye will expand into becoming like a full seeing of spirit, if you just continue to place more and more attention on that and allow it to slowly develop through gratitude and awareness.
And I also want to add on
and one of the things too, when you start, good.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Your thoughts.
No, go ahead.
A lot of what you guys are thinking, you probably are talking to spirit in your mind. I had no idea. Like I thought I was just like 8,000 things going on in my head. But once I actually sat down with somebody and started learning, specifically with mediumship, I learned that like 80 to 90% of the stuff in my head wasn't even mine. It was spirit talking to me, other people's things talking to me, other people's bodies were talking to me to tell me what they wanted. And all this time I thought it was just me. So now it's been so quiet, knowing and being able to acknowledge and doing exactly what Casey says. Thank you so much for showing me all this stuff. So
yeah, that's a really important comment too, because if you're having a dialogue in your head, you're having it with someone other than yourself. Like when it's just you, it's just a flow of knowing, right? But if you start having a dialogue, well, who is that?
Right? It seems so obvious. And
It
you're like,
wasn't
oh.
until my first foundation class with Heather where we did this exercise, and I had always like had this dialogue going in my head ever since maybe since third grade. I had a spirit with me that was constantly, and I just thought it was like somebody in spirit that, but it was actually like with me all the time. And have going through this experience in foundation, I let go of all that, and I actually had the first time in my life then where I had a real conscious knowing, wow, this is what silence feels like. And I had meditated, but I had never had this degree of just like peace and calm. It's like, wow.
What do
It
you
took
do?
it took me a lot. It was during the whatever Jane's thing is that they play, the energetic synthesis of being, that little guided meditation type thing.
Yeah.
That's when I had the experience with it. And me and that one spirit said, bye-bye, and I'm not here for you. And then it was just like, I settled into this new silence. And I was there with Ryan and Deanna, and I was able to share that with them at lunch, because when I came out of it, I was just crying. Like I just had these tears coming down my eyes because it was like the spirit that I had been with for so long. And then I had this just sense of joy. And then I laughed for like 20 minutes straight. And the class was laughing with me. And then I just stopped, and Heather looks and she smiles and she's like, well, some people got a little bit more out of that than others.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, this is sort of going sidetracked. I know that we do experience energy, spirit. Those of us who aren't aware or think that we're aware of our psychic abilities, we're experiencing more than we're typically aware of. Again, I always guide people through the sort of exercise of, okay, for those who can't communicate with their guides or see spirit or whatever, if you could just imagine right now what it would be like if you could communicate with them, what would that be like? And then people give all this detailed explanation. But then tying to, like Hank was saying, that moment of silence, I've been watching for even after developing more of my psychic abilities, could communicate with my guides and stuff. I never had a true experience of this like total silence that all these gurus and guides and spiritual teachers that I were listening to were talking about. And I remember I was watching some guy on YouTube give a talk about, oneness and consciousness and all this. I started to think, this guy's full of crap. He doesn't know what he's talking about, man. There's nothing to any of this silent stuff. And I started to get really frustrated. And then I went and watched one more video where this guy was talking about his story of like what initially sort of like snapped within him to break identification with the thought for him. And he shared his story. And then I realized the thought that he shared that he had that initially like broke that identification, I'd had similar thoughts to that. And then that kind of happened for me. And same thing, there was this experience that silence stepped back and for the first time was not identified with the thought stream whatsoever. And the thought, nothing, no emotions, no thoughts were coming. And then just laughter. I was in my room and I was living with my parents at the time. I just was laughing out loud, like I was a little kid again, just for like an hour straight. And then sometimes the mind would come in a little bit for a second and go, why are you laughing? And I had no idea, but it was amazing. So yeah, that's whether or not you've got a spirit you're dealing with that's causing the mental chatter, or if you just have a lot of internal dialogue or whatever. Discovering that silence is a beautiful experience that will then allow you to really develop your psychic abilities, I think.
During the Shaman Apprenticeship Program, it's not something that's normally included, but if you ask the right questions, they might do it. But ask them in class randomly one day, can you tell us anything about the Bushmen? And it's a very specific tradition from Africa where they have like this uncontrollable laughter that comes over them. And it's just awesome. We got to try to get them to pull it out when it's not really appropriate for the class. But, if you ask him a question, it doesn't matter. He'll go wherever it needs to go. We had Elizabeth sharing with us, too, that soften gaze and seeing openings, tubes in the sky, information comes through, or travel using them. So like meaning that if you have those little tubes in the sky, you could actually, whether if you want to use like something similar to astral projection, like use those as portals to go to other realms, maybe in journey space.
Oh, I never tried that. Huh.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to experiment with. Although I usually am outside and standing upright, so I don't know if I'd want to drive through while I'm walking down the street.
Or
but if I'm on the beach laying down and hanging out, that would be something to try.
Yeah. Oh, that's always because I get spirit coming through with tones a lot. Granted, I'm the sonic shaman, so I guess just vibration and that comes through easily to me. And I'll be driving and I'll hear like one tone that I know that if I could just settle in, I'm out. It's like, why does it come when I'm driving? No, I can't just go.
You're nice and relaxed and meditative when you're driving.
It happens a lot. So maybe I'll try that. Not try. I will do it. As I fall asleep, I'll just like imagine like I'm driving, and then I'll wait for the toad, and then I'll just fall into it.
Or get a Tesla.
Get a Tesla. There you go.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I've seen some odd reports, but I guess some people are doing some weird shenanigans when some of those accidents happen. So maybe they're better than they are portrayed to be right now. Cool. But if you're just joining us, or if you've been with us since the beginning, we're talking about psychic awareness, kind of sharing a lot of stories. And as these stories come up, sharing maybe how different tools and tricks of how you can settle in and become aware of your own psychic abilities. But if you like to make a comment, you're welcome to do so, and we'll speak to it. Elizabeth just said too, it just happens, intention of who, what is here. I'm not sure if you're referring to the
tubes just happen for you.
Oh, cool.
I think she's saying that when she's looking at those tubes, it just happens that she kind of gets sucked through them and then is off traveling. Maybe. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Cool.
That was what I got from that.
But whatever your experience is, couple things to do is ask yourself, does it feel light for me to interact with that? Because there's this binary code of the universe of heavy and light that goes back from shamanism, Kucha, and Sami to access consciousness, actually calling it heavy and light. But you start to have this binary dialogue with the universe. And if you're having an awareness of something, you're going to ask, well, does this feel light for me? Is this going to create possibility in my life? And
speaking of light,
as your Geiger counter to pick things or not pick things that you want to play with. And then if it is for you to play with, then the question would be, well, what could I be and what could I do here to have the greatest experience possible with what I'm being aware of? And she was saying, yeah, tubes connecting to journeying. And there's an infinite number of possibilities and journey space of different realms and experiences that you could go to.
Oh, yes, there are. And that is a beautiful way to begin to develop a real dialogue with spirit, because sometimes, I guide people on shamanic, I teach people to do shamanic journeying. And sometimes people with no experience with communicating with their spirit guides or anything spiritual at all, maybe they only have had an interest in general meditation, but I'm able to bring them into the space where they're traveling through the realms of spirit, even if they're not having going from place to place and flying around. They're at least like on a beach or something where they're laying on the table physically, but they're on a beautiful beach in the realms of spirit. But then I can guide people on these experiences where they meet with their guides, they're communicating, having these healing experiences. And then I even tell them when they're in the journey, I give them the suggestion that you can communicate with spirit in this way when you're not in the journey space, when you're awake with your eyes open. If you want to and you're ready, you can communicate with your guides because they're always around you. And then I bring people out of that, and then I'll guide them. Do you feel called to talk to your guides? I say, yeah, okay. All right. So then I sort of guide them to communicate with them and say, they're like, yeah, no, I can't see him here. This is totally different. People have that mental block of like, well, I'm in the physical, so I can't experience anything other than the physical because whatever, that's the way they've been indoctrinated. But so learning to get accustomed to the journey space and sort of normalizing the experience of traveling through the realms of spirit and communicating with spiritual beings can then slowly start to shift the paradigm and bring you into a space where you're ready to have those experiences while you're in your waking state, while you're experiencing physical reality.
Absolutely.
Giving yourself permission.
Yes.
That's a big thing. And then also just showing up, because a lot of the stuff that we are aware of, if you are buying in with the model of efficiency from the corporate world and just being like an autopilot, just, go to work, get this shit done, go home, get what you need to get done, and you're not even showing up for your experience, we're missing out on all this magic that's right in front of us. And not because it's not there, just because we're so busy being the worker bee and being in these routines that just are not a contribution at all to us. And Bethany is chiming in saying, hi guys, you're all awesome. Thank Bethany for showing.
Thank you.
And I did just post a link if you're watching on Facebook. If you take a moment, go to our YouTube channel, take a moment to like and subscribe to it there as well. That's definitely going to help us out and make our videos more accessible to people, because YouTube will say, hey, people really like this. So if you give a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, it's going to help our content reach a lot more people. So you can be a contribution to us if you like to take a moment and do that for us. So thank you in advance. Cool.
And we were talking about the driving thing a little bit ago, and it always seems like my spirit guides like to make themselves like really present and apparent when I'm driving. And so oftentimes, and like you were just saying, we have this sort of mundane experience of reality and aren't experiencing the spiritual just because we're too busy. But like for when you do start to open up, like the magic starts to carry over into everything. Maybe not in the moments when you're really focused on getting some sort of work done or something, but like when I'm driving, I'll just notice, okay, one of my guides is sitting in the seat next to me. The rest are hanging out in the back space of the car. One's on top, and they're like, hey, do you want to sing? And then we all just start singing these songs together in the language of the angels and all that. And so, you know, what would normally just be someone sitting there driving on their way to work, for me, it's this magical experience singing with a bunch of angels. So so developing your psychic abilities adds so much magic to your life, and like Hank was saying, you don't necessarily have to develop these abilities to help heal or channel messages for people. Just do it for the joy in your own life, to develop more joy. That's really what it's about.
Really, if you were that tuned in with everything you could be aware of, like how much more possibility would be in your life, because you're noticing the things that spirits are guiding you to that are going to enrich what your experience is. So even if it's a self first thing, you know, you're doing it for you so that you can have the greatest potential experience that you can. So do it for you. You deserve it.
I also want to add too, like, you guys have this beautiful way of wording things, and so, like, for me, I found that a lot of times when I get really, because I'm not a frustrated person normally, you know, I'm like, but when I get like really frustrated out of nowhere, a lot of times it's my guides. Like, I have an Andromedan who gets really pissed at me when I'm not listening. So then I get really angry, because then, like, oh. So if you're feeling that, like, come out of nowhere, maybe it's a time to like stop and pause and then ask one of those questions that Hank and you guys ask all the time, like, what is here? What are you trying to tell me? Who's here? What am I missing? What should I be doing instead? Type of thing. Yeah. And then instantly it'll be like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be doing something completely different over here. And then later on, it's always like some kind of weird thing that was going to occur over here. And if I would have been a part of it, it would have been like not good.
Yeah. And part of what you just said, the most important thing is you take a stop and pause. Like, even if you're not skilled yet, or don't have so much confidence in asking the questions, just taking a step back and pausing is 90% of the battle, because you're taking yourself out of autopilot. In Access, we call those the Beckamix. It's the autopilot that you created to do all the mundane things that were boring for you, that you didn't want to do, and all that stuff. So taking yourself out of that space and just getting in the energy of responding instead of reacting, that in and of itself, even with no question, will start to shift your entire experience. Because a lot of the things that we do, we're starting to analyze ourselves after the fact, like, wow, that's so not me. Why did I do that? It's because you were reacting instead of responding. And if you were just to shift that one little energy, it's going to start to shift a lot. Ashley Rose was sharing that it's important to create safety, trust within yourself, and confidence.
She's my teacher. She's the one that started opening me up in January.
And she's bringing up, we did a whole thing on plant medicine yesterday, actually, but the very first step in the medicine journey, natives honor the pipe. It's slowing down, going into the silence, prayer, and get curious. That brings up Casey's one of his favorite little things, curious awareness.
Yes. And any of this stuff, become curiously aware of whatever it is you're experiencing in the moment. And that same kind of curious awareness we experience when we're a kid and we see something beautiful like a waterfall for the first time, with no judgment. You've never seen anything like this before. Just that, wow, look at that. With that same kind of, what, not really thinking, what is that? But just so intent, like, that's amazing, having the raw, beautiful experience of it with that curious awareness, and bringing that, and bringing that energy into all of this is, that will, I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
It'll help cultivate.
Yeah, there you go. That's the word.
Like, this is why we have that kind of stuff, with his thought things. He'd go into that curious play state of a child, and then that's when, boom, he'd get all his ideas. So
yeah, absolutely.
And children are just willing to receive. They are a sponge. They are demanding attention from everyone and everything around them, and so they just want to receive it all.
Yeah, that was the book, The Joy of Business. Is she's talking about receiving a lot, And so that was really cool to hear her experience of how she never really was open to receiving like anything. She was just give without being willing to receive. So yeah, but a big part of learning to develop your psychic abilities is like, are you willing to receive that right now? Are you in the space where you're open to receiving without, judging yourself that you're not willing or whatever judgment you might have around that?
Yeah. And Ashley was also sharing child curiosity, and children are so connected, and she even lets children run her classes. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
That's one thing, Casey, you don't know about it yet, but with access, like children, anybody under 16, access all the classes are 100% free, because Gary Douglas says children are the ones that are going to fix this world.
Children that's awesome.
That are going to be rising up and making choices that are going to shift our reality. And it's so important that any access class is free for children 16 and under. And then if you're 16 to 18, it's half price.
Awesome.
It's just a great testament. Access is aware of how potent children are and their gift. And for a kid to run bars, for example, takes maybe 10 minutes. For an adult to do it's like 90 minutes, because they have no point of view or judgments about what they're doing. And they can just do it like that.
So it was a friend of mine a couple of years ago. I was over at his house, and he has, they're older now. Maybe this is longer than a couple of years ago. I don't know how long ago this was. But anyway, I'm over there, and his kids were around hanging out. They're younger. And I don't know why, but I was showing my friend a few techniques with energy. Like I was showing him how to like form a ball of chi and all this. And then his kids got really interested, and they just started playing with all this stuff. And I like, for my friend who's, older than I am, he was sitting there like really like intently focusing, and he was doing a good job, but it took a lot of like me explaining and I can see energetically what he's doing. So like the energy's kind of all over the place, and he's like just barely starting to get a hang on the focus. And then his kids come over, and they're like, oh, what if I do this? And then all of a sudden they got this like really complex energy pattern, and they're just tossing energy balls at me and doing all this stuff. And I haven't even given them an explanation of how to do it. They're just like, we're in the energy of it, and then we're learning all this stuff. And then like I saw them a week later, and they were like, hey, what does my energy look like when I do this? And then they're like, I saw all these like wavy things in their aura, and I was like, are you trying to make your aura look like all wavy and spiky? And they're like, yeah, it's like this anime character. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And so yeah, but like it just goes to show that no one ever told those kids that stuff is not possible, or at least they haven't been programmed as much that stuff's not possible. So they're right there in it, able to do it with ease and effort.
I have a children's story too. When we were in Florida, we were staying on the beach, and they wanted to go out with I think they're called boogie boards. I don't know the right term, but they're these little boards that you can kind of belly surf on the waves.
Yeah.
This day there weren't really that many waves, and my son comes up and says, Daddy, can you ask the ocean to bring more waves? And I'm like, well, we can ask together if you want. I can walk you through a ceremony, introduce yourself to the ocean, and then ask yourself. And so I had all the kids sitting there with the little shells going through like a little ceremony, introducing themselves just like we would do with a kintu. And then they throw the shells in, and they say, Mama Cocha, please give us more waves. And no joke, like within 5 minutes, we were getting these much bigger waves, and they were having a blast. And you hear them running in going, thank you, Mama Cocha.
I love that so much.
That's awesome. We did something similar in San Diego. I had a friend that we walked in the middle of the night, and we kind of did that with the ocean, and the waves started coming in, and I'm like, I'm the one, man. Disney princess.
But really, the reason this works so effortlessly for children is that they have no point of view, and they haven't been taught as much anyway that it can't happen or that it won't happen. And with my kids, and I know Mary does the same thing with hers, we're encouraging the development. Like we'll be sitting and watching the cars go by, and I'll ask them like, okay, what color car is going to come next? Or if you're about to open up an elevator, like, okay, which one's going to come first? And I'm like, don't guess. Like you're know that you know, tell me which one will open next, and getting them in a kind of a rhythm of accessing that. And to the point, to my own detriment, where we put a password on the switch machine, and my son Oliver just sits down, and he's like, oh, there's a password now, and he's just like, do, and it just opens. I'm like, really? That wasn't even the code I made. It was like a random one Nintendo said, and I was like, how fair are you? Oh man, this is I'm really pleased that they're developing it, but sometimes it's to my own detriment.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I love to hear that. And that's the thing, is there's so many of us that grew up that were not only not encouraged to develop our abilities, but were actively discouraged. So I think I'm filled with so much joy and hope to hear stories about like you, Hank, who are actually encouraging the development of that stuff in their children. So that makes me so happy. It gives me so much hope.
And for Faith, we have a question of talking a little bit more about energy. I would love for you guys to talk more about energy. I've just started practicing Reiki, and I've got my first attunement, but I have this suspicion that I'm doing more than basic Reiki.
You are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because Reiki, all it is like if you think of your body like a guitar and you have like an infinite number of strings, really, all Reiki does is go in and it plings one of those strings and reminds you about that one frequency. That's what an attunement does. But there's like these little resonances that happen. So like once you have an openness to receive that attunement, however open you are to receiving, it can ripple out and cause a lot more awakening than you paid for the class, which is great.
Now, I remember my experience was the opposite. I'd been spirit taught how to, and I just sort of remembered through past life training and all that, how to heal and work with energy in a much more advanced way than Reiki teaches. But I'd heard now, and I, at the time, the only form of energy healing that I was really aware of that you could go and get trained in was Reiki. And I'd heard people talk about it and they're like, it's amazing. And so I went and I found a Reiki practitioner and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to pay for it. And then like, I'll learn even more. And then I'll also have a piece of paper, which says I can do this, which is beneficial. So I went and got the training and she's telling me about this and stuff. And it's all kind of like really basic stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah. Can I feel your energy before we get started? She goes, yeah, I can. So she puts her hands on me and starts channeling Reiki. And I just feel this kind of really super gentle, subtle flow of energy. And I was like, okay, but it does more than that, right? She goes, well, no, that's Reiki. And I'm like, the first time I ever intuitively healed someone, I was doing like 15 times more than what you're doing right now. And she's like, yeah, that's it. So I still wasn't, at this point, I was like, okay, so I went through with it. I thought, maybe she's just not the most skilled Reiki practitioner. That's a possibility. So I found someone else, completely different person who was on top of Reiki practitioner. Like, I don't know what she did. She like worked in psychology and like did all this other stuff. So like, really well accomplished woman. And got Reiki from her and same thing, just super.
There's a reason for this. Now there's over 400 different types of Reiki nowadays. Like Spirit told me one day before I taught Reiki, because I had learned it and I was about to teach it. And it's like, before you do that, you got to go out and make a list of all the different Reikis that are out there. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay. And no joke, I had a spreadsheet and I had like 400 things in there. And then Spirit says, now you can stop. And it said now all 400 of these are legitimately Reiki. All 400 are what they say they are, and all 400 are a limitation. And they said teach no limit. And so Reiki, like the way Dr. Uzui originally taught it, there was no attunement process. He went up on a mountain where that energy was naturally present. And one reason when I teach it, I take people out into nature and I find an energetic hotspot where the energy, the waka, the eye to the upper world is naturally present, just like on the mountain where he went, and do the attunements where the energy is naturally present. And then the other thing is that it's about, there's no protocol the way he originally taught it. Like you would stand and you would get a hit on what that person needs. You do the protocol if you don't get a hit. And then it's really more like, what energy does this person need to facilitate the healing? God guided was, it could be any energy. Today it could be this, tomorrow it could be that, but you're in the allowance of whatever the energy is. But the way that it's kind of disseminated through all the different facilitators is that, oh, this is what I taught it was, so that's how I'm teaching it. And they're teaching like one flavor of the 52 Baskin-Robbins flavors. And that's like you have 400 different kinds, and all 400 are Reiki, but all 400 are slight variations of what a person truly knows is in their heart is what it is, but it's a limitation. So if you just had your first Reiki attunement, ask Spirit to say, as you go through falling asleep, say, hey, Dr. Uzui, come here, Dr. Uzui. And like, do what you do to me. Like, if you were alive today, come do what you do. And that would be a really, Mike, we do need to do the next one. I promise people art and master, and I haven't done it yet. We'll definitely plan that. But ask Dr. Zhu to come, and that's one of the things I do with my attunements. I do it in class the way that we were taught to do the attunements, so people get that. But I also just bring in Yari Hatanuma Dr. Zui Ompi Ompi Ompi, and I bring his energy into my mesa, and then I do a pakui bring all the energy, all the Reiki masters of all time in, and this is how I do it at the hotspot. I'd bring it into my mesa, and then I pakui it down through the crown of their head, like all the Reiki masters, the totality of all the lineages of Reiki. Vroom, now that's my Reiki 1 class. So I do it like the traditional way. I don't even open the manual, but feel how that feels, and just ask Dr. Zui to come and have, teach you what he can teach you.
I was going to say, like, there's so many different, we're all different. Like, we all have our own light codes, our own patterns. So the way that we connect with the energy is going to have our own little signature, our own little blueprint on it. So it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I'm a Reiki master and ART certified as well. And my first experience with a Reiki attunement, I was a nurse, an RN, working in an ICU step-down unit. And I was already pretty keyed in to things intuitively without realizing I was, but that like totally blew open everything for me. So like the hospital has a shit ton of spirits going on from everybody that's been sick, everything they pulled in with them in order to be sick. So I was like having a major overwhelm, almost panic, anxiety attacks over these things that I didn't even know what was going on. It was like hard for me to function at first when I didn't know what was going on. And it turned into more of a medical intuition thing. So I would be just being after a Reiki attunement, you kind of are like a walking Reiki energy. Mm-hmm. You don't have to actually be like sitting down to do, although that gives you a lot more when you're doing a Reiki session like that. But so I was going around and connecting into everybody else's energy so much that I'd know things in advance, and that helps like reconnect me back into the natural intuitive abilities, psychic abilities I had. So my name for a while was the Black Cloud because I'd walk past somebody's room and I would know that they were crashing. So I'd go in to check on them and end up calling a rapid response on people that weren't even my patients. So people saw me coming in and they were like, shit, Mary's here tonight. Damn it.
You made them earn their paycheck a little bit more, huh?
Right, yeah. But, I mean, what would have happened if I wasn't there? So I don't know if that's more of what you were meaning, like that kind of experience, because that definitely led me into the medical mediumship, which, again, I didn't even know I was doing until January.
Medical mediumship, I like that. And one thing too, with the Reiki attunements, one thing I need to just put out there to dial back one step is that when you're doing an energy work with someone like that, you're gifting them only what they're willing and able to receive. And so also like because I just got the sense somebody's watching was just like, wow, that could just like totally blast somebody, and they put them way overload on sensitivity. Not the case, because spirit, you have a lot of spirit support, and you're only going to get what you're going to be able to receive and deal with. And just to throw that, Ashley was just saying that she loves the energy of your readings and what you're being when you're doing your healing. And she also did a shout out for your artwork a little bit further up. I'd have to go find the comment, but Mary does this amazing artwork. You got to stop by the center when it's open and take a look at it.
It's definitely spirit guided.
Faith was saying she had a unique attunement experience where she saw a shocking negative images. Everyone else in my group felt hugs and saw pretty colors, and I was told it sounded like a soul retrieval. Had no idea what that was. My first hint something more was happening. Maybe
Akashic Records.
Yeah,
maybe you tapped into your Akashic Records.
Or if there's part of you that didn't have Reiki on, that in order for that to get resonated, there were parts of you fragmented in other time and space. It's possible, like anything's possible with that. But if you ever find things that you're perceiving as negative, that's really the only true Satan, seeing anything as negative. If you have scary images show up, a great tool would be, well, what's right about this I'm not getting? What contribution does having this awareness have for me right now? And putting it in that context, what healing does it have for me? You can have a very scary image or experience and still walk away with the healing and the light from it. So.
Yeah, and that's one, I don't know why this is coming through it, but I know like when people have it, we were talking about plant medicine yesterday, and one of the ones that came up was ayahuasca journeys. And so a lot of people will have visions of like things that would seem really horrifying to a lot of people, like just like all kinds of like spiders and like snakes and otherworldly beings that seem almost like demonic and things. People say like, well, what's spiritual about that? And I've had that even not talking about psychedelics. People talk about like having experience, negative, what people perceive to be negative spiritual experiences. So, well, how is that spiritual? Well, spiritual doesn't necessarily mean all light and fluffy and rainbows and hugs all the time. The realms of spirit are just as complex, in fact, infinitely more complex than the physical realm. So just like there are pleasant, happy, people on earth that are here to help everyone around them and just want to be a positive influence on people, there are spiritual beings who want to help and heal and are here to assist us. And then just like there are human beings who are greedy and looking to corrupt others for their own personal gain, etc., there are spiritual beings trying to do the same thing. But in truth, those aren't good and evil unless we perceive them to be good and evil and we place that judgment on them. They just are as they are. All these things are as they are. And that sounds like a really obvious statement, but in truth, it's kind of like one of the great paradoxes. Evil exists because we perceive it, and it is a part of our reality when we place that judgment on it. But at the same time, it's not real at all. So it's real in our minds, but it's not real. So,
and as a shaman being the hollow bone, I like to say you are the conductor of the symphony of the universe. And in the role of shaman, to have the ability to pick up any instrument, any other aspect of divinity, and just use the healing and the contribution that being and entity have for you in that moment. It doesn't mean you have to deal with them all the time, but being in the space where you don't have the fear of dealing with any of it, and then you can deal with any of it, quite literally. Let's see. There was quite a few comments. It's hard to keep up. Oh, one thing was you talk about ayahuasca, and she's saying Aya can take you on. That's why I love calling her the grandma energy. It is. It's like grandma hits you with a wooden spoon. Why do you do that? and what I would say, if you are planning on doing any sort of work like that, really go on a rigorous moral inventory of everything. You, yourself, your soul, bring up as much as you can consciously, because there's other medicines that will work a lot more with things in the subconscious first that are more loving, not loving. They don't whap you in the face with a spoon, But if you haven't done any of that work at all, and you jump into something like grandma, it can't feel like that, because all those boulders are just going. And it is very uncomfortable, and it doesn't have to be. You can go through and do a lot of that work in advance, and have a much easier time of it. So,
I love it. Yes, and then thank you, Ashley, thank you. But Faith here said it wasn't entirely a negative experience. She had positive effects, and she got rid of a lot of anxieties and fears. And so a lot of the times, the reason we have real experiences that cause us suffering or fear in the moment is that it's sort of presenting to us the things that are in our field that are holding us back or are causing us dis-ease or suffering or whatever it might be. And it brings up, like you said, the attunement in that experience happened. So that energy was like, okay, now's the time. Here it is. You can get rid of this and deal with it and help it to move on. So it's no longer a problem. But we have to, sometimes it has to be really brought to light in a clear way in order for us to be able to identify that energy in order to help it to move on. So, yeah.
While you were talking about that, you just totally lit up green, Casey. Nice and healing.
Love it. Oh, that's wonderful.
And note that as things like that come up, if you can be in the space that you don't have to relive the trauma and the drama, you can be aware of the energy and just be an allowance of it moving on. And where we, especially in the West, where we get caught up, is we love to dig through our shit. Like, I can't just throw the box away, man. I have to open it up and look through it first. And then like you're reliving the pain and stuff like that. But you could just take the box and chuck it. You haven't opened it in 10 years. Do you really need anything that's in there? No. Just throw it. Just throw it out. Or ask the question, is there anything I really need to revisit in this box? And if not, just chuck it. And a lot of our suffering is self-imposed in a way, because we don't want to let go of the energy without knowing what we want to let go of. But we don't need to know. We can just let go.
Right.
There's another rhyme. We don't need to know. We can just let go.
Oh, that's beautiful. We don't need to know. We can just let go. I love it.
Beyond it.
There's the call yesterday. That was the plant medicine one. That's a whole nother world of conversation.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm seeing the comment there. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, we'll do another one, and if you hop on for that, we can go down those rabbit holes. But we don't want to scare people just starting out with getting some intuitive things things.
We brought up plant medicine and like ayahuasca and stuff like that, and just know that those tools are not necessary in order to have really powerful, even visionary experiences. Like I was saying, last night I was hanging out, cuddling with angels and seeing a beautiful light show in my sky of like fire created by one of my angel guides. And I didn't consume anything other than some water before bed in order to experience that. That was just me, bringing myself into the space where I'm open up to perceive that. And we can all learn to do that without the assistance of any substance. We all have it built in already. We just have to learn to access what we already have and what's already out there.
Yeah, I've never had any of that. Done any of that stuff yet, so and I'm like writing hieroglyphics without knowing what I'm doing.
The other thing with that too is the Caro of Peru, they just do breathing exercises. So they have certain mudras where they're pulling energy in from the upper, middle, and lower worlds, and just kind of over oxygenating the system, and then it puts them into a visionary state. And they actually look at all the plant medicine as potentially dangerous. But if you get down to the curandero traditions, and they're all for it. Though, if you are ever going to do that, the other thing I would say is have a point person be your sitter. If you are going to ever do that, it's especially if you're going to go to Peru, make sure you have a real shaman. There's a lot of tourist shamans that know how to make the stuff, but they're not doing anything really energetically. They're just there for the tourists. So, like, if you're going to be partaking, it's really good to have a shaman sit and keep you energetically in a good space. Yes, Kundalini breath work can take you. It's specifically the breath of fire that I'm referring to, but the Caro would call it something totally different. So, depending what, like, if Reiki was developed in Peru, it would have been called Kenchai instead of Reiki, light energy, right? Yeah, maybe it would be Sami. It would be Sami, or it would be Kenchai. If Dr. Uzui was a Caro Indian, it would have been called something different. Because we're all looking through the filters of whatever it is that we know. So, and that's one of the things they say too, is like, don't get caught up comparing what you know to somebody else. Embrace the differences, because in the differences is the gold, and the differences is the magic of another little piece of what you could use for possibility.
The fractals, they return. Day 2.
Actually, we started a little bit early today, so we can go a little bit later too. I know we're coming up in an hour, but we started early, so
we can go for an hour and a half if we want. If it continues to flow.
As long as the conversation's flowing, and I don't know how much time Mary has. I mean, it is stay at home, so it's
I'm good right now.
And now it's spring break. Like, kids are just being kids right now. Just have to defend them against my walking in and my wife working from home in the upstairs room. So
let me ask both of you then, because we've been talking about sort of a little bit of our stories of how we started to develop our abilities to communicate with spirit. Do either of you have a story that you remember and can share about the first time you channeled some kind of message or something for another person?
Well, channeling your psychic awareness, like
whatever. I don't know. Channeling might not have been the right word, but like had an experience of spirit that you shared with someone, and they were like, "Oh wow," and that resonated with them, and you realized, "Okay, this isn't."
Yeah, I got a funny story. Okay. I mean, it's not the first time, but when I finally got sober and I was going out to fellowships of the spirit to kind of create context around my gifts, and I forget if it was Spiritual Insight Training 1 or 2, but we were doing these little group readings. And I had no clue what I was doing. And one of the things they said, well, if you don't get anything, just make it up and see what happens. And so I'm with my group, and I tell the lady, hey, I see you growing up on a farm and you had pigtails. And she's laughing, going, oh, yes, yes. And I'm thinking, wow, that's cool. I just made that up. So this is working. And I'm like, and you lived on a farm, and there was a well. I see a well, and you like throwing things down the well. And she's laughing and saying, oh, yeah, that's right on. And then the next thing I saw was her holding like this wrapped bundle and it kicking. And she threw it down the well. And I'm like, did you throw something alive down the well? And then she starts bawling into tears, and she's going, and she hits me like really hard on the leg. She's like, now, why would you see that? And apparently when she was little, there were these rabbits that they would raise, and they would eat them for dinner. Like, it was one of the food sources on the farm. And this rabbit was like her favorite rabbit, and it was on the menu for that night. And so she had gone to the well and threw it down the well to save it. And at that point, I didn't know what to do with that message. And the mentor in the group said, now the reason this is coming up is because you have been holding on to the guilt of throwing your rabbit down the well all these years. And it wasn't an act of, it's nothing you need to be guilty about. You were doing an act of kindness. You were doing what you felt was right. And there was a great healing that came of it. But that was like one of the first like actual readings I'd ever done. And it's like all this was coming through. And what I thought I was making up was a huge thing from her childhood that had held on for years. And it was really good to have the context. Like if you ever go get some official training, Fellowships of Spirit's great. I went through their 2-year program, and it sounds like Ashley in comments teaches intuitive work as well. Whoever feels like to, but getting some sort of context, because you might have experiences that come up that, oh, I don't know how to deal with that, and having a guide or a mentor can give you some ways to reframe things for clients as you step into that space to give messages.
I'm curious about the Fellowship of the Spirit thing. Maybe we'll have to talk about that off air a little bit. That's something that kind of has been calling out to me as you brought it up a few times. But so for me, I wasn't in person. This was I was finding those. I think I mentioned it a few times when I was first discovering this stuff. I would go online and find these chat rooms where there were people talking about spiritual stuff, and it was before there was all the like information. You could just go on Facebook and find all these groups and stuff. Like none of that was there, and I was just on some spiritual chat room that I found that was like there was like Illuminati symbols on the website and everything, and it was all so anyway. So I'm having a conversation with this one person, and it was not that long after I had that initial experience of seeing that spirit walking over the puddle on the street. And I'm talking, just chatting and stuff, like trying to, just connect and learn a little bit more about what I'm experiencing and if other people are having these experiences. And it was me and this one guy talking, and then another person entered the chat, and the other guy had experience doing readings. I didn't at all at this point. And he said, he was talking to the other person in the chat and said, there's a man with you, and I'm like getting that I need to like communicate with him somehow, but I'm having trouble. And all of a sudden in my head, it was just like his name is Pete or Peter. So I typed in, I'm like, I just felt to type it. I think his name might be Pete or Peter. And then I heard like German, like something come through, and what I thought was German. And I was like, I think I'm hearing him talking German. I don't know if that makes any sense. And then something else like really specific came through. I think it was like he was like really tall and bald or something. And I'm like, I think he's like tall and bald. And so she goes on and like she's silent for a little bit, and then she types, and she said, "My best friend from Germany, whose name was Peter but went by Pete, just passed away a few months ago." And she'd been like kind of feeling his presence and all that. And then we went on to continue to like channel messages for it. But up until this point, I had no experience with channeling any kind of message for anyone. And that was when things started to click. Like, wow, the information that I'm accessing, the things that I'm experiencing are very, very real. And that was when things all these connections started to happen after that in a very rapid way. And it was like the universe was giving me proof over, like that was one experience where, okay, how can I deny that that was real, right? I'd have to be an idiot to deny that. But still, I had doubts about things for years, and Spirit over and over and over and over and over again just gave me undeniable proof, experience after experience, to the point where I really would have to be pretty stupid to have any doubts anymore.
That's one thing when talk about fellowships over the 2-year program. You have to do 70 documented readings and healings. And what takes people to the tipping point where they've had so much validation about the message work that they're doing that it takes them from the point of self-doubt to self-confidence. Yeah. So you just got to practice it, and you'll build that muscle, and you'll get the confidence that what you're getting, even if it's 100% wrong and they can't take it, it is exactly what they need to hear. And I had one Spirit told me, everything you're about to say is good. They're not going to be able to take it. It's going to be 100% wrong, and you got to give the message anyway. And I'm like, really? And apparently someone in the audience, because I was doing public work, which I don't like doing. Now I'm doing it online, right? But I was giving a message, and the person afterwards came up to me that I had like 0 hits on. He's like, I thought about doing this. And they looked at me as a professional at the time, and this was like 8 years ago. But they said, and if you have an off day, then maybe I can do it too, and it's okay. And really giving him the wrong message was actually exactly what he needed. So that's really awesome. I was just glad Spirit gave me a heads up that it was going to happen, because it would have been I would have like quit and gone under a rock. How about you, Mary? Oh, and I did post a link to Mary's profile on our website, because I know Ashley's been tooting your horn here, saying she gives daily readings and things. Speaking of, on our profile page, we don't have that you do readings, so you should submit that to the edit.
it's a new thing. So
Yeah, so
yes.
we can update that for you if you want. And Acuity has a Zoom integration and stuff, so like you can easily step into virtual readings.
Spirit
How
just hit
does it
me with
get
this.
easier than that?
Spirit just hit me with this, Mary. Afterwards, if you have time today, do you want to trade readings?
Sure.
Okay.
That sounds like fun.
Awesome. Cool. Oh, very
cool.
fun.
My first experience was actually at the center, Hank, and it led me to go find Ashley, who had thrown this out there. Everything always connects when you look at it and take a step back. So I was doing a healing, my first healing at the center, and at the end, I started getting messages, and they were just like really silly. And I'm like, I'm not going to say that because that's just ridiculous. We're doing a healing, and I'm not going to say any of that. I don't even know where that came from, but it kept coming back over and over, like more strong in my head, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to say it. So then I said it, and it was she had boxes, like moving boxes in her car still, and her grandma was coming through and telling her to clean her room, and that she had just passed 4 months ago. And I'm like, this is like really specific things. And she was like, oh my God, I do have boxes in my car. I just moved back home, and oh my God, I do have to clean my room. It's a mess. And yes, my grandma just passed like 4 months ago. Like that, I was like, oh. And then I also like was catching on. I had like, that was like the moment like everything just came together, because I was also picking up on like her medical things that were going on, and like it was exact things. So it was like, Mary, you can't just go flouncing around anymore. You gotta go and learn. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to be getting this and it's going to be that strong, I might as well go and figure out and learn more. And then Ashley had posted about her group is called Unleash Your Power. Ooh. And that was like a safe place for everyone to come and play. Unleash. And you unleash, yes, you learn like all these things. She does like readings, mediumship. So you get to play in a bunch of other stuff in a safe space to figure out exactly what's going on. And I was like,
actually, with the energy of Unleash, I see like letting the genie out of the bottle. Like,
yeah.
Ashley, I don't know if maybe Mary, you can, or I guess I can look you up. But Ashley, if we're not friends on Facebook, that which direction is it? That name right there, Casey MacBride. Send me a friend request if we're not friends already. And I'm really interested in joining that group and learning more about what you teach and what you do. So, or maybe you can, if you you can send the name of the group. We could put it up as a little banner or whatever, or comment. Yeah. I'm curious about that too. So, yeah, I would love to connect.
I'm in the second group. It's called Quantum Leap, and it's more like galactic-y kind of thing. So,
oh, nice.
That's been super fun. Love my aliens.
Question pop up, kind of getting back to contributing to everybody. How do you know what direction to take? I don't know what to do with myself, and I'm finding it to be very frustrating.
That's why I went into the Unleashed Power or an Unleashed group. Like it was because I didn't know what direction to take, and that one kind of gave like an overall thing for you to play with. And like once you start glazing over things, something's going to pull you in somewhere. Like something's going to hook, and you're just going to feel like a spark, or like guys.
Yeah. It shines to me is how I look. I notice things like that.
And also ask questions about it if you're starting to become aware of things, but you don't know what direction to go with it or how to develop that in the best way for yourself and others. Then you just sit down and ask. If you can ask to your guides, or just put it out there, put the question out there of what can I do right now in order to develop these abilities in a way that will be the greatest contribution to myself and others.
And Mary, what was the name of the group again?
Unleash Your Power. With Ashley Rose and Jamie Voss.
Yeah, and the one tool that comes from Access that is just you can write out things that you're considering. You can have an index card like something else that I haven't put down. And whatever you are thinking about, just like hold the card with the question written out, or like say you're thinking about going to Fellowships of the Spirit, or you're thinking about taking the Shamanic Apprenticeship Program, or whatever it is. You can write the question out and hold it and say, okay, if I choose this, how does my life feel in 5 years? Because if you haven't developed that binary dialogue, if you put it out on a trajectory, it can sometimes make that sense of heavy and light more apparent. So you can feel, okay, so this feels lighter 5 years from now, this one doesn't. You pick up the next one, this feels really light. And you can start to get into feeling what's going to be light. But I always add another one, something else I haven't asked yet. And oftentimes the path that you have not, it's not about walking someone else's path. It's about making your own path. It's the path that's never been walked before. And that's really the energy. Like, you don't have to choose what anybody else has done, like what really feels light. And don't be afraid to mix things and match things. I was criticized a lot going through school. Like, you got to pick something. My wife would always say, another class, you got to pick something. So like essential oils, sound healing, like all this stuff. But I take the best and leave the rest, and I mix and match things all over the place. And that's just part of how I operate. It's a potency, not a problem. And so if you're anything, maybe you're a little bit like me with that. It's like, it's hard to choose because you want to do it all. Maybe doing it all is okay. And you don't have to go to the end of any one particular thing. You take a little bit from all kinds of different places and come to your own awareness. For me, it was about getting enough of a context of all kinds of weird stuff that when I get my own weird stuff, then I'll deal with it. Like Tom Cratsley's green pepper healing, like having a green pepper, waving it around to do a healing for somebody, pretty out of the box. And then when Spirit gives me something equally crazy, I'm like, well, why not? So, it's getting enough context where I could really start trusting my own crazy intuitions.
And yeah, learning to trust. And I think a lot of people have, that's sort of the biggest difficulty is in developing the psychic abilities, is people don't trust their own intuition and the knowings that do come through. They attribute it to just being imagination. And two things I would say to that. One is fake it till you make it. Like we've been talking about, if you don't have the confidence to be able to channel messages from Spirit or whatever it might be you're interested in, just sort of fake that confidence. What would it be like if you were confident? And then act that way. And then the other thing is...
go.
And then the other thing... oh, wow, there was another thing. Where did it go? Spirit, bring it back.
Pock, whatever that was.
Yeah, whatever it was.
What are you thinking? You can also use the cards that Hank was talking about to like shuffle and just pull like oracle card style if you're afraid that if you know what's on the card while you're holding it, you're making shit up. So you can also just do that too, reaffirm. A lot of times you'll draw the same card over and over. Huh?
Like when my wife and I were like actually write down the things you're considering on index cards, and you can even put them face down so you don't know what it is. And that's how Anya and I chose Westlake to live. Actually, we wrote down all the cities we were picking, and we pendulumed for it. And we took the index cards, we wrote them all down, and we shuffled them and put them face down. And then I would pendulum, and I got Westlake, and she would pendulum, and I would shuffle them up, and she would do it, and she got Westlake. And we weren't even really considering, because like, well, we don't really have enough money to buy a house in Westlake. But then we found like this one house that it was an older home, and it was like at the right price point, and they actually came down in price after the inspection and everything. And we have like a great house like right by Crocker Park. A little bit older, but it was like, wow, we never would have even thought to look there because it wasn't even on our radar because we thought we couldn't afford there.
So like, really, Jason this because he wrote down a bunch of stuff on index cards to do the same thing.
I might have shared it
for moving.
I might have shared it. I don't know. Either that or great minds think alike. I see him in the back trying to get your attention, maybe, or he's
confirming. He said, "Yeah, it was you."
Cool. You take out the element of you knowing what it is, and you get a more accurate reading. And if you're going to use a pendulum for it, I would just try to tune into heavy and light. I used that tool back before Access Days, and I didn't. I never thought about just asking, hey, is this heavy or light? But if you were going to use a pendulum, you could also use like a banana stand holder, and you can put it on there and just touch the bottom. And you're even taking the element of you swinging it at all out of the equation because you're actually using it with the banana stand and just touching it just slightly, and you'll still get a response out of it.
I like to use my body too.
Yeah, or muscle testing.
You always have that on hand, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, for people who don't know muscle testing, another great way to touch in with heavy and light, it's the whole thing where you hold an arm out and you ask a question, and if you have strength, it's true for you, and if it's weak, it's fake for you. You can do that just with your two fingers. This finger represents the arm that you're doing the pushing on. This finger represents the arm that's doing the pushing, and you can just ask, is my name Mary? No. Is my name Hank? Yes. And you can get just a slight tension variation in your fingers by doing kinesiology. So.
Oh, we lost Hank. Hank disappeared. His signal was kind of breaking up there. Well, we're at around the hour and 15-minute mark. So if he doesn't pop back on here in a second. Oh, there he is.
Kathy, did we answer your question for you? Awesome.
Yep.
She says, awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, cool.
Cool. I will call last call for questions. If you get a question in the next 2 minutes or so, we'll still speak to it and talk to it. And otherwise, we'll kind of start to wrap up. But I did post again Mary's link for her profile on the HHH site. And then I'm going to post a link, or Casey, you probably can get to it faster, the link for your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Shaman's Way.
Yeah, I do all kinds of, I do channeled messages. Speaking of psychic abilities, I channel messages from spirit for the betterment of all of us. And I also do guided shamanic meditations, which are sort of well, I should be looking at the screen while I'm doing this, are sort of a hybrid between a guided meditation and a shamanic journey. And they tend to be really cool experiences for people and can open the doorways for people to start to have experiences with their spirit guides, with spiritual beings and energy and all that stuff. So definitely check out Shaman's Way on YouTube if you're interested in any of that.
Yep.
And subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. So subscribe to all these wonderful channels. That's really the greatest contribution you can make in this particular moment. We would really appreciate that. So let me pull up that link.
Yeah. And I'm going to post 2 links. There's one I'm posting for my website. We have a 6-week shaman apprenticeship, well, not 6 weeks. We have a 7-weekend apprenticeship program coming up, but we have a 6-week virtual class coming up since we're starting late. So if you're interested in dipping your toes in the world of shamanism, it is 6-week virtual class, and at the end of it, by then you will have built a Tehuanthin Mesa, so a medicine bundle similar to the one I use, just empowered a little bit differently because the initiations are different for it. So there's that, and Casey's going to be posting his Shaman's Way one. And then there's a final class I wanted to post about because I was hoping she would hop on. I sent her the link. Angie Hewitt is a registered medium at Lilydale, and we are hosting her for a intuition development class virtually at the center. And that's it's $30, and it's going to be this Saturday at 1:00. There's a possibility we might have to move it, but I don't know yet. But either way, we'll send out the information, and this is the link for the intuition class.
How do you put comments in this fancy?
I don't know if you have access to putting comments in or not on your side. You have to have access to the board. Be cool like me and Casey.
Right.
Okay. Kathy, after it's over, I'll go back in and send you the link for Unleash.
Or if you
message Ashley.
you can Facebook Facebook it to me. Oh, it's Unleash Your Potential, right?
Power.
Oh, Unleash Your Power. Unleash Your Power. Unleash Your Potency.
Ashley Rose, who's also commented in there too, Kathy. She's the teacher, owner.
Oh, there's a lot of Unleash Your Power groups, apparently.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll do it after.
You'll have to find it. Yeah, but we can post it afterwards. Very cool. And let's see, any questions? We were saying last call for questions. So if you have a comment or a question, anything you'd like to contribute, you can. As we're waiting. Or you got the Shaman's Way link up yet or no?
I did. Yeah. I posted that a little bit.
Okay, cool. So I think we got everything. Any final words of wisdom, Mary? We always kind of do a final go around before we end it. So you don't have to go first. We can let you.
Okay, good. I'm like, do I have wisdom?
I don't know. Do you?
I don't know. We're about to find out.
What energy, space, consciousness, and choice could your body, being, and beyond be to impart the greatest wisdom of possibility with all listeners with total ease? There you go. So now you can let that percolate while we go around. Casey, you want to go first, or shall I?
Sure, I can go. So I guess what I would say is that many people out there are, and I see this when I'm doing even just massage therapy. I'll start to talk to people about some of the other stuff that I do, the energy work that I do, etc. And I hear so many people say things like, I've been having these experiences lately that I can't explain, and I never talked to anybody about them because they would just think I'm crazy. And so just know that many of the experiences we have that we write off as being, weird or crazy or whatever could be the potential to lead you to an entirely new magical life where you have these psychic abilities that you're using for the joy of your own life and to help others as well. So if you do have that little bit of a calling and any of this resonated with you and said, you know what, I think I feel called to work with some of this. Just start right now. Don't hesitate. Don't put it off and say, well, when I'm ready, then I'll start to work with this stuff. Right here, right now, this moment is the only moment we ever have. So if you feel called, take action and listen to the calling of spirit, and then watch the world unfold, watch whole new worlds unfold around you.
Thank you. And for me, we didn't really talk about empaths much today, but I'm really getting it as you step into these gifts. One of the things that hold a lot of us back is that we start to judge the things that we're aware of, especially empaths. So like to be the hollow bone and whatever the information that you are aware of, pure consciousness in the Access definition is awareness of everything in the absence of a judgment about it. So whatever the information coming through is, if you can look at it from the space of interesting point of view, instead of like, oh, wow, that person's evil, or oh, wow, that person's energy is icky or whatever, and you can take the judgment out of it, being aware suddenly became a whole lot easier. So be the hollow bone, be aware, sense, don't feel, and then you'll have a much easier time stepping into your gifts. Now, Mary, it's your turn.
I don't know. I had something and I lost it.
That's a great way to start. We determined that the Dalai Lama always says he doesn't know, and then he says the most profound thing ever.
Boom, drop
Yeah,
the
so
mic, yeah.
you say, start with I don't know, because now you have the space to come in from any possibility.
You're saying that I'm past. I don't know. I had keyed into something there, but yeah. So I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Well, let's take her energy of I don't know is you don't have to know what to do with this gift. Like you can be in the space of not knowing and still start to receive and be an allowance. So don't let that stop you. Like, or just make a choice. Like the person that we were talking to that was in the energy of not knowing what to do, you can always change your mind. But the one thing will happen for sure if you don't make a choice is nothing. So choose something and then choose again and then choose again. You can always change your mind, and it's easier to move the momentum of a ship in motion than a ship that's not in motion. So if you have motion, then choose something else. You have a way easier way to shift than if you're in a point and just never start.
And not knowing can be one of the most amazing places to be to start developing these gifts. Just like we were talking about with children, no one ever told them otherwise. They don't know one way or the other whether or not all of these amazing things are possible. So when someone presents the idea that, hey, you can tap in and talk to spiritual beings, they run with it and are able to do so much. And although a lot of us may not be children anymore, we can still tap into that same beginner's mind, like we like to call it, and Zen and Buddhism, and have that beginner's mindset of not judging anything, being in the space that you're open to receiving anything. So yeah, when I ask people about, one thing I ask people is, who are you? I love to ask people that question. And a lot of people who are a little more perceptive and aware say, I don't know. And I think that's awesome. I get so excited for them. So that's amazing. You're in a wonderful place right now. And oftentimes they're not happy with that reaction. But then I expand upon that because you're open to receiving the experience of who you are because you don't know.
Ooh,
counselor
I like
in high
that.
school asked me that, and to this day I was like, I still don't know the answer to that.
Well,
But I
that's great.
remembered what I was going to say. Also, when you guys start this, a lot of times, like, people who want to develop their psychic abilities, we've kind of dug in and studied things, like wishing and kind of hoping that one day that'll happen to us and occur. So when you actually do start doing stuff and you start getting some things that are exactly the same as what other people are saying or exactly the same as what's in books, so we tend to be like, well, I'm just making that up because everyone knows that. Like, I've already read that, I already know that, so I'm just making it up. But you're not. Like, that is spirit kind of telling you, hey, this is confirming, this is what you know, so I'm just going to confirm what you already know, so that way you know that you know. And then later it'll start getting a little bit more unique, and you can build from there. But that was a thing that occurred for me a lot. I'm like, well, everybody's getting the same message. Everything's exactly the same. But that's the way that they're helping you also acknowledge that you know what you're doing. Just go a little deeper now. Allow yourself to relax and open up and trust yourself more to get that boom message you're looking for that's a little bit more unique and individual for you to find your own style.
Right. And take the validation in the little messages. You don't have to have a boom message to get validation. It could be something simple.
Yeah.
There's magic everywhere. Appreciate it all, and not just the big things, and you'll get even more and more magic in your life because the universe will recognize that, hey, I'm giving value and acknowledgement to all the things I'm receiving, not just the boom. moments.
This is my on my desk. My friend got for me.
I have immense powers.
The boom, boom.
I like it. That's going to be a good thing. Boom moments. It's like
Right?
that Emerald
Boom
guy.
moment.
It's like the spiritual equivalent of the cooking. Bam.
It's right next to my Zulu doll.
Oh yes, Zulu doll. Oh yeah, that's awesome. You got to show them. Cool little thing. And this thing was misidentified. They had it as some sort of. It's actually an African doll, but it was like mismarked, and she got it for an amazing price point.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
That's awesome.
but
It
those
was
are
funny.
exceptionally rare Zulu dolls. So pretty
Oh,
cool.
wow.
I was in an antique store and it was calling and I'm like, Hank, I feel like this should be for you or something. And I sent him the picture and it was labeled as a kachina. And he's like, well, that's not Peruvian. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. So I ended up going back and buying her later
Yeah.
for
Well,
me.
I should have recognized it because I do some African practices as well, but it didn't call to me for that. It was definitely for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's so awesome.
Maybe because you're going to have a little bit of that too. I don't know if Hector's still going to come out in August, hopefully, but we're hopefully going to be having a introduction into Sansei class that will be coming up with one of Zane's teachers from New Jersey. We had it planned. We haven't announced it yet because now we don't know what's going to be date wise and travel wise and what's going to be possible. But that's also something to put the energy out to help actualize when it comes to the African traditions. We're more of an Afro-Caribbean tradition in that one. But cool. Thank you, everybody. And this has been great. Mary, thank you for coming on. This was a lot of
thanks
fun.
for inviting me.
Yeah,
It was
thank
a
you
lot
so
of
much.
fun.
I love the energy of having you here today with us. It was wonderful. So you're always welcome to come back anytime you want to jump in and talk with us. Absolutely.
Cool.
This is fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the more people that are on, I just feel like the interplay of energy really just created more. So
yeah, agreed.
Awesome. Well, everyone, please share and subscribe. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, right? I think.
Yeah, unless we want to do earlier, we can do earlier now.
Okay, so we'll post it, but we'll definitely be on tomorrow if you want to come in and watch another episode of Stir Crazy Shamans. Bethany is saying thank you too. That it was wonderful. I'll have to put that up. Bethany, you should come on too. Get over your stage fright. You can
girl. Can I get one more thing before we hop off?
Sure.
This Zulu doll was actually an intuitive hit too before I even got it. So in that Unleash Your Power group, straight Zulu came in my head and I had no idea what the hell that was until I Googled it after. And I was like, that's weird. Okay, so I thought it was a message for somebody else because somebody else was we were doing readings for that. Because sometimes you get messages for yourself at the same time. Well, not sometimes. That happens all the time. Anyway, So Zulu came in the head, and I was like, all right, cool. And I shelved it. And then Jason and I went on vacation and ended up at that antique store trying to buy this Kachina doll for Hank. And then it turns out that she's actually a Zulu tribe doll.
Oh, that's awesome.
So she was telling me, I'm coming. Hey, look out for me.
With the African traditions that typically they reach out and they choose to work with you. It's not the other. It's rare that someone's just hey, I want to go work with Shango or something like that. And I think I shared this story to Mary. I don't know if Casey's heard this, but I was taking a class and I had missed a class and Zane had to catch me up and we were doing a ceremony at Goddess Elite after hours. And while we were doing it, Melissa had altar for Shango because that was one of the deities that she had come to work with. And while we're doing it, right in front of us, 3 cards, because she would play cards with Shango. He likes playing games and stuff. So 3 cards flipped up in front of us. So it was 2, 4, 8. So the sound hero in me is wow, that's octaves. Wow, that's pretty cool. And then I heard a voice in my head go, work with me. And I'm like, okay. And so I started getting into some of the African traditions. So working with Shango and now Papa Legba, I was in doing a really deep, intense meditation with one of my guides. And during that, I just started calling in. I didn't even know who Papa Legba was because I have no official training in any of it. And it turns out it's the crossroads entity in the tradition. That it's the doorway to talk to all the other Orishas or Lao, depending on your tradition. And I go to an event the next day, Pat Earth's Fair. And do you know Freddie? Mary, you might know Freddie. But they always have like all the pretty like Days of the Dead skulls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she comes up to me randomly and she has this necklace in her hand. She says, "Papa says to tell you he loves working with you." And she puts it on my head. I was like, okay, this is definitely interesting. So, I never planned on working with it, but it has really taught me a whole new level of working with entities.
Oh, wow. That's an awesome story.
Oh, yeah. It's just like, yeah.
That's a powerful one.
Yeah, it's great fun. So, wow. I'm so glad we, oh, do you have something else, Mary? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You just, I go in the store. What am I going? Oh, I'm going to go buy a regular deck of Rider Tarot cards to like practice with. And Hank goes, "Here you go. Here you go. This is for you." And handed me this tarot deck. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to buy it. And Hank is like, "Does this feel light?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's interesting. It's not something I buy myself." But this deck has been like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like I was dreaming. The cards were talking to me at night while I was dreaming about it. I couldn't sleep that night. It was
wow.
I think one of the first cards you opened up to was like really significant to you or something. I forget now.
Yeah,
but
it was a rainbow snake.
yeah.
I love snakes.
The Quichi Amaru.
Yeah.
The rainbow serpent. Well, they have the tradition in Peru. It's like the rainbow serpent. It's like it has the feet of the puma, the body of a snake, and the wings of the hummingbird or the condor. And it's like the galactic serpent that can swim throughout the cosmos. So pretty cool. Kind of tying in the tradition and the African tradition together. Pretty cool stuff.
It's fun.
Oh, well, thank you, guys. Like, we could just keep going, but
I know, right?
Yeah, seriously. I was about to go into a whole nother story.
Nick,
just real quick one. Speaking of rainbow snakes, the first animal guide or spirit guide I connected with was a snake. And I saw him in one of the first shamanic journeys I went on and connected with that guide. But then I never had any validation about like other people being able to see or experience guides in the way that I was. And then I went for some spiritual shop somewhere in Lakewood. And the woman, like right when I walked through the door, she was like, "Oh, that's an interesting snake that's following you." And I was like, "Whoa, you can see that too?" And then, but she was... I hadn't seen it this way, but she was like, "Yeah," and she just saw the snake changing. It's like all these different colors. So I didn't know there was such a thing as like a rainbow snake, and I wonder if that's anywhere near a similar experience. But
maybe. You're gonna have to check some new stuff out now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some research.
People used to tell me all the time, "Wow, you got like this giant, awesome snake around your neck, like just chilling like a feather boa," and I'm like, "Okay." But like snakes always end up appearing. Especially when I'm outside and I'm questioning what the hell I'm doing in my life, a snake will come by and I'm like, okay, all right, go do it.
They used to call me the snake whisperer on Peely Island. I would go and, Steve Irwin was one of my idols as a child. And I would go and I would take these wild water snakes and I would catch them. And I just had this way, like at first they're freaking out, trying to like bite me and get away. But I would just sit there and be with them and be totally present. And then they would like calm down and realize that I wasn't a threat or anything. And again, these were wild snakes. Yeah. And I would get them to the point where I was wearing them around my neck and they would crawl through my fingers and stuff. I used to do that all the time as a kid. And then later on my spiritual journey, the first guide I connected with was snakes. And I've always been really drawn to them.
Oh, I've got to start calling you Mr. Potter here.
Mr. Potter.
Yeah, like he had the whole Slytherin.
You parcel tongue, you.
Very cool. Oh, if this, in closing, guys, if you're watching this, like we're just made of the same animated essence. You have just as much magic in your lives if you're willing to see it and willing to allow it. So let it be an inspiration, knowing that all this magic is out there if you're not experiencing it. And if you are experiencing it, next time come on and share and share your experience. Give us a comment. Let us know what's been going on in your life where you see the magic and your intuition coming out in front of you. So awesome. All right.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, everyone, for your energy.
Nike. We love you all. And please share, subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.